The world was white and screaming. In the winter of 1872, the Wyoming Territory was not a place for mercy. It was a blank, howling page of wind and ice, and Eli Thorne was a very small word written on it. He kept his head down, his face wrapped in a wool scarf that was stiff with his own frozen breath. The wind tore at him, a physical, malicious thing, trying to peel him from the earth. He was mending the top rail of his small corral. The task was miserable. The nails were tiny, slippery things in his thick leather gloves. He'd already dropped 2, losing them instantly in the accumulating drift. His horse, a tough gray gelding named Scab, huddled against the lean-to on the far side of the enclosure, his tail to the wind, his coat thick with frost. Eli pulled off his right glove, bared his hand to the air, and gripped a nail. The metal was so cold it burned, a sharp, stinging kiss. He set it against the post and struck it with the hammer, his movements economical and practiced. He could not afford wasted motion. Wasted motion was wasted heat. He finished the rail. The wood was secure. The horse was safe. He pushed his frozen, raw hand back into the glove, the wool lining feeling abrasive against his numb skin. He gathered his tools. His world had shrunk to this: the small cabin behind him, the small corral, and the vast, deadly emptiness that surrounded them. He turned to go inside, to the meager warmth of his hearth, and he stopped, just beyond the new-mended fence line. Something was wrong, a disturbance in the snow. It was not the track of a deer, nor the scuff of a coyote. It was too small, too desperate. Habit, honed by 3 years of war and 5 years of solitude, made him draw the pistol from his belt. He kept it tucked under his heavy canvas coat. He moved slow, the snow crunching under his boots, the wind trying to deafen him. He bent down. He brushed the blowing powder away. They were footprints, small, human, and they were barefoot. He looked up. He scanned the white horizon. Nothing, no rider, no wagon, just the storm. Who in God's name would be out here, and barefoot? It was a death sentence. He followed the tracks. They were not tracks to anywhere. They started from the shallow creek bed 20 yards away. As if someone had crawled up from the ice, they staggered. 10 yards, 15. The wind was already scouring them away. Filling in the shallow depressions, he almost stepped on her. She was a drift of rags piled against the trunk of a lone, skeletal cottonwood. He thought it was a bundle of discarded laundry, frozen stiff. He nudged it with his boot. A sound came out, a low, thin sound, like a dying kitten. He dropped his tools. He holstered his pistol. He knelt. It was a woman. Her hair, dark and wild, was matted with ice. Her dress was a thin, dark blue cotton, ripped at the shoulder and torn at the hem. It was a dress for a summer evening, for a parlor, not for a Wyoming blizzard. He pushed the frozen hair from her face. Her skin was waxy, a pale gray. Her lips were not pale. They were the color of a fresh bruise, a deep, unsettling blue. Her feet, visible where the thin dress had ridden up, were a ghastly purple-white. He put his gloved hand before her mouth, feeling for breath. He waited. He watched. Nothing. He cursed. A low, harsh sound stolen by the wind. He was too late. He had seen enough death. He started to stand up, and then a small puff of vapor, so faint he almost missed it, clouded the leather of his glove. She was alive. He did not think. He acted. He slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. She was light, terribly light, like a bundle of dry sticks. He grunted as he stood, the wind fighting him, trying to tear her from his grasp. He carried her home in silence. The 20 yards back to his cabin felt like a mile. He kicked the door open with his boot and shouldered his way inside, into the small, dim room. The cabin was one room, Spartan. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A cot was pushed against the other. A rough-hewn table and 2 chairs sat in the middle. It was clean, but it was the clean, cold tidiness of a life lived alone. The fire was low, just a bed of red-orange coals. He laid her on the rough floorboards near the hearth. Not on his cot. The cot was too high, too soft. She needed the floor. He went to his cot and pulled off his only blanket. It was a thick, heavy wool, smelling of wood smoke, pine, and the faint, dusty scent of solitude. He unfolded it and laid it over her. Then he went to work. He threw logs on the fire, building it up fast, ignoring the sparks that hissed onto the stone. He filled his kettle with water from the barrel by the door and set it to warm. Not hot. He knew frostbite. Hot water would kill the flesh. He knelt beside her. He was gentle, but his movements were not tender. They were efficient. He took his knife and cut away the frozen, torn rags of her dress where they were stuck to her skin. He cut away the remnants of her thin stockings. Her feet were bad. The skin was hard, white and waxy. He brought the basin of warm water. He submerged her feet. He took his roughest towel and began to rub. Hard, painfully. It was the only way. He worked on her feet, then her hands, his own fingers aching from the repetitive motion. He forced her limbs to bend, to accept circulation, to accept the pain of life returning. He worked for hours. The storm howled outside, a constant, high-pitched keen. The cabin grew warm. He stripped off his coat, working in his shirt sleeves. He did not think of her as a woman. He thought of her as a task, a problem of survival. Keep the flesh, fight the cold. He did not know when she woke. He only knew that one moment he was rubbing her frozen hand, and the next, her eyes were open, staring at him. They were not groggy. They were not confused. They were wide with pure, animal terror. She screamed. It was not a loud scream. It was a dry, rasping sound, torn from a throat raw with cold. She scrambled backward, crab walking away from him, dragging the blanket with her. Her back hit the rough log wall of the cabin. She hissed, like a cornered cat, and pulled the blanket up to her chin, her eyes darting from him to the door, to the fire, looking for escape. "It's all right," Eli said. His voice was rough from disuse, gravelly. "You're safe." She did not hear him. Or if she did not believe him. She was all instinct. She bunched her legs under her, preparing to run. "Don't," Eli said, raising a hand. "Your feet." She ignored him. She tried to stand. The moment her frost-bitten feet touched the floorboards and took her weight, she let out a sharp, breathless cry of pure agony. Her legs buckled. She collapsed, falling back against the wall, her face white with pain. She panted, chest heaving, but her eyes never left him. She was cornered, wounded, and terrified. Eli stayed where he was, by the hearth. He kept his hands open, away from his pistol. "I'm not going to hurt you. You are freezing." She watched him, her breathing ragged. He had a pot of thin broth simmering by the fire. He had been warming it for himself. He ladled some into a wooden bowl. He slid it across the floorboards. It stopped a few feet from her. "You need to eat." She stared at the bowl, then at him. He backed away. He went and sat on his stool by the table, putting distance between them. Her movements were quick. She snatched the bowl, her eyes still on him. She brought it to her lips and drank, fast and loud, spilling broth down her chin and onto the blanket. She was starving. She finished it in seconds and scraped the bottom of the bowl with her fingers, licking them clean. He waited. The only sound was the wind battering the walls and the crackle of the fire. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low. She put the bowl down. Her gaze was still wary, but the terror had been replaced by a hard, watchful suspicion. "Clara," she said. It was a lie. He heard it in the way she said it. The name was a shield, picked at random. He nodded, accepting it anyway. "What were you doing out there? Clara?" Her eyes flickered to the door. "I was left behind. My party. They went on. They left me—" "There's no party, miss," Eli said, his voice flat. "There's no tracks but yours, and yours were barefoot." Her face closed. The flash of fear returned, mingled with a new anger. "Men," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Men might be looking for me. You shouldn't have brought me here. You should have left me." "That's not my way." Eli said simply. "You don't understand," she whispered, clutching the blanket. "They're dangerous." "This whole land is dangerous," Eli replied. He stood up, not to approach her, but to get more wood for the fire. He fed the logs into the flames, one by one. "You're safe here for now. The storm's got the world locked tight. No one is traveling in this." He turned, but kept his back to the fire, not facing her directly. "I'm Eli Thorne." He paused, looking into the shadows of the cabin. "I'm just a man with no one left. There's no one here but me and the wind. You can have the cot." She did not move. He sighed, a small puff of air. He took his canvas coat from the peg and laid it on the floor, on the side of the hearth opposite her. He sat down, his back against the wall, and pulled his hat down low. "Get some sleep. You're safe from the cold." He did not say she was safe from the men. For 3 days, the world remained white. The blizzard howled, a relentless, shrieking assault that buried the cabin up to its one window. The sound was a constant, high-pitched keen, a noise that frayed the nerves and made the small room feel even smaller. They were trapped. Eli and the ghost he had pulled from the snow. She was a creature of shadows. She took the cot, but she did not sleep. He would wake in the dark, the fire burned down to embers, and see her sitting upright, staring into the darkness, the blanket clutched to her chest. He made no demands. He moved with a careful, deliberate slowness. His gentle manner was not a kindness. It was a defense. He had learned in the war that sudden movements got you killed. He was learning now that they terrified her. He gave her space, a commodity they barely had. When he made food, a grim meal of beans and salted pork, he would set her bowl on the table and walk away, turning his back to mend his tack or clean his rifle. Only then would she move, quick and silent, to eat. Life had to go on, even in a storm. The chores were a rhythm that kept madness at bay. On the 3rd day, the wind lessened. Eli had to dig his way out of the cabin. The snowdrift piled high against the door. He spent an hour clearing a path to the lean-to, to feed and water Scab. When he came back, covered in snow, his beard stiff with ice, he saw she had taken the bucket to the water barrel. It was half empty. She was trying to lift it, to haul it to the fire to melt more snow. She was weak. Her arms trembled. She could barely lift it. He walked past her, not acknowledging the effort. He took the larger bucket from the porch. "Stay inside. I'll haul the snow." The next day, she was stronger. While he split wood on the porch, the sharp thwack of the axe echoing in the frozen air, she stacked it by the fire. They moved around each other in a silent, awkward dance. He hauled the water. She kneaded the dough for hardtack biscuits, her hands, still red and swollen, moving stiffly. She was physically present, but emotionally, she was 1,000 miles away. She spoke only when necessary. "The wood is low. I need water." Her eyes were always on the door. Every time the wind gusted and the cabin creaked, she jumped, her hand flying to her throat. She was a coiled spring, ready to snap or to shatter. On the 4th night, the storm had finally broken. The world outside was quiet, blanketed, and frozen. The silence in the cabin was heavy, thicker than the cold. Eli lay on his mat on the floor. He was a light sleeper. The snap of a twig outside would wake him. He heard the sound, a whimper. He sat up, his hand moving to the pistol beside him. He listened. It came again. From the cot, he saw her in the dim firelight. She was tangled in the blanket, her body tense, her head thrashing on the thin pillow. "No," she whispered. The word was thick with sleep and terror. "No, please, don't, stop!" She was dreaming. He let out his breath, but then she began to cry. Not a loud wail. It was worse. It was a choked, terrible, silent weeping, as if she was being hurt right then and had learned not to make a sound. He stood up. He walked to the cot. The floorboards were cold under his socks. He stood over her, a large shadow. "Clara," he said softly. "Wake up! You're dreaming!" His voice cut through the nightmare. She cried out, a small, sharp gasp, and sat bolt upright. Her eyes were wide, blind with leftover terror. She saw him, a man, looming over her in the dark. She shrank back, pushing herself against the log wall, her hands flying up to shield her face. "Don't," she breathed. "Please, don't." Eli froze. He raised his hands, palms out. "I'm not." "I won't." He backed away, putting space between them. He went to the hearth. She was shaking. Her whole body trembled, a violent, rattling shudder that had nothing to do with the cold. She was still weeping, the quiet, awful sobs of someone who expected no comfort. "I'm so cold," she whimpered. It was a broken sound. It was not about the temperature in the room. It was about the cold inside her, the cold she had been found in, the cold that had never left. Eli looked at her, huddled on the cot. He looked at the blanket she was clutching. It was his only one. He looked at the fire, which was dying, the logs burning down to red coals. He went to the woodpile. He picked up 3 heavy logs he had been saving for the dawn. He threw them on the fire. Sparks shot up the chimney. The fire roared to life, catching the dry wood, casting dancing orange light on the walls, on her pale, tear-streaked face. He turned back to her. She was watching him, her eyes still wide. He walked to the cot. She flinched, but did not move. He did not touch her. He reached for the edge of the blanket and tucked it tighter around her shoulders. He spoke to the floor, his voice low and rough. "I'll burn for you instead." He did not go back to his mat. He sat on the floor, on the cold stones of the hearth, his back to her. He picked up the iron poker and jabbed at the new logs, making them burn brighter. He sat guard, a silent barrier between her and the nightmares. He sat there, upright, feeding the fire, until the first gray light of morning crept through the snow-caked window. In the days that followed, a fragile truce settled. The world thawed. And so, slowly, did she. But the trauma was a living thing, a shadow that clung to her. It was revealed in hints, in small, sharp moments that cut Eli deeper than he expected. One morning, he passed her a tin mug of coffee. His knuckles, rough and scarred, brushed the back of her hand. She dropped the mug. Hot coffee splashed across the floor, across her bare feet. She did not cry out from the heat. She leaped back, her hand flying to her throat, her body cringing, her eyes squeezed shut, as if expecting a blow. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I'm clumsy. I'm sorry." She repeated it, over and over, like a prayer. Eli just knelt and began to clean up the mess with a rag. "No harm done," he said, his voice flat. "It's just coffee." But he had seen it. He had seen the way she prepared for pain. He had a small, cracked piece of mirror nailed to the wall by the door. It was a vanity, traded from a trapper for 2 rabbit pelts. He used it to shave, to make sure he did not look like the wild man he was becoming. He watched her. She never looked at it. She would walk past it, averting her eyes. She fixed her hair, which was slowly regaining its life, by feel, her back to the glass. She turned away from it when she changed, when she washed her face. It was as if she could not bear to see the person who lived in that glass. She avoided her own reflection like it was a curse. One evening, he was carving. He was whittling a small piece of pine, making a hook for the wall. He was good with his hands. She was sitting by the fire, trying to get the knots out of her matted hair. It was a painful, frustrating process. She had been using her fingers for days. He saw her pull something from the pocket of the tattered dress he had saved. It was a comb, a cheap thing, made of bone, and 2 of its main teeth were snapped off. She tried to use it. It snagged in a tangle. She winced, a sharp intake of breath. She pulled. The comb stuck. He watched her give up. Her shoulders slumped. She put the broken comb on the table, a picture of her own brokenness. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she got up and went outside, to the porch, just to be away from it. Eli stopped carving the hook. He looked at the broken comb. Later that night, when she was asleep, or pretending to be, he picked it up. He studied it by the firelight. He went to his small box of tools and supplies. He found a piece of hardwood, saved from a broken chair leg. He found his thinnest sinew. He set to work. He did not carve a new comb. He mended the old one. He carved 2 new teeth, whittling them down with painstaking precision. He fit them into the gaps. He used the sinew, wrapping it tight, binding the new to the old, his big, rough hands moving with surprising delicacy. He rubbed the new teeth with a bit of grease, smoothing them, sanding them with his thumb until they would not catch. It was a clumsy repair. It was ugly, but it was whole. The next morning, after their silent breakfast, he held it out to her. She stared at it. She looked at the mended comb, at the rough sinew, at the 2 new, pale teeth. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. She took it. She held it in her palm. She turned away from him, toward the wall, and she wept. It was not the terrified sound of her nightmare. It was not the panicked apology. This was a quiet, profound, heartbreaking sorrow. She cried for the small, broken thing that someone had bothered to fix. Eli did not move. He did not comfort her. He sat at the table, picked up his knife, and went back to cleaning his fingernails. He gave her the dignity of grieving for whatever it was that comb meant. He just sat, listening to her quiet tears, and the slow, steady ticking of the clock he did not own. The thaw came slow. Then, all at once, for a week after the blizzard, the world was a high, white silence. The snow packed hard as stone. Then the sun came out, a pale, indifferent eye, in the vast Wyoming sky. The world began to drip. From inside the cabin, the sound was a constant patter. Water running off the roof. Tiny rivulets tracing paths down the single window pane. The plink, plink, plink of meltwater falling into the barrel by the door. It was the sound of a world unlocking. Inside, the silence had become a different beast. It was no longer the shocked, frozen silence of survival. It was the thick, heavy silence of things unsaid. They had settled into a routine. Eli would rise before dawn, his movements quiet, and tend the fire. He would go out, check on Scab, hunt or check his traps. Clara, as she was called, would tend the cabin. She swept the floor. She made the hard, dense bread. She mended. The mended comb, he noticed, was always tucked into the tight, dark knot of her hair. She was still a shadow. She anticipated his needs with a frightening, practiced efficiency. If he looked toward the water bucket, she was already reaching for it. If his gloves were wet, she set them by the fire to dry without a word. It was the service of a servant or a slave, and it made Eli's jaw tighten. He did not want her service. He wanted her to sit. He wanted her to rest. He wanted her to look at him, just once, without her eyes looking through him, at the threat he might become. It happened on a Tuesday, or what Eli reckoned was a Tuesday. He was cleaning his rifle, the pieces laid out on an oiled cloth on the table. The smell of gun oil and beeswax filled the small room. Clara was scrubbing the rough-hewn table, the one he had just vacated. She was on her knees, scouring the wood with a harsh brush and lye soap. "Leave it," Eli said. She did not stop. The brush went scritch, scritch, scritch against the pine. "It's dirty. It's my table. I like it dirty." The brushing stopped. She stilled, her hands in the gray, soapy water, her back to him. "Clara," he said, his voice softer. She flinched. It was barely perceptible. A tightening of her shoulders under the man's shirt he had given her. "What is your name?" he asked. Not what is. He asked it like a man asking a serious question, one that required a true answer. She stayed silent for a long time. The only sound was the drip of the snowmelt outside. "Clara is my name," she said, her voice muffled. "No, it's not," Eli said. He fitted the trigger mechanism back into place, his hands steady. "It's the name you're wearing. It's not the name you own." She turned, slowly. She sat back on her heels. Her hands were red and raw from the lie. "You should not ask." "I am asking." Her eyes met his. They were dark, and for the first time, not just afraid, they were angry. "What does it matter? A name is for a person. I am not a person. I am property. Eli stopped his work. He set the rifle stock down. No one is property. A bitter, ugly sound escaped her. It might have been a laugh. If she remembered how. A piece of paper says otherwise. A piece of paper with my father's name on it. He drank. He gambled. He owed a man, a wealthy man. When my father died, the man came to our house. He took the livestock. He took the furniture. And then he took me. She looked down at her hands, submerged in the dirty water. He said it was to pay the debt. He said I would be a servant in his house, a maid, to sweep, to cook. I was grateful. At first, I had a roof. I had food. Eli said nothing. He watched her. He had seen men in the war tell stories of their own deaths. She was doing it now. I was a good servant, she whispered. I worked hard. I never spoke unless spoken to. I kept my eyes on the floor. She paused, and her breath hitched. But he did not want a servant who kept her eyes on the floor. He wanted more. She swallowed, the sound dry and loud in the quiet. He was a respected man. He had a large house. He smiled at church. And at night, he locked my door. From the outside, he said I was his, that the debt was never paid. That it would never be paid. He said he was taking me in. That's what he called it. Taking me in. She scrubbed her hand against the floorboards. A hard, scraping motion. He changed my name. He said I wasn't Anne anymore. He gave me a name from a book he liked. He said Clara was a good name for something he owned. The name Anne hung in the air. A small, wounded bird. He wanted me to be his wife. After everything, he said he would make me decent. He had a ring. I ran. I took a horse. I ran. I did not know where. I just ran until the horse fell. And then I walked. And then you found me. She finished. The story was told. She was braced, her shoulders high, her chin down, waiting for the judgment, waiting for the disgust, waiting for him to throw her back out into the snow. Eli Thorne was quiet for a full minute. He looked at his rifle. He looked at the fire. He looked at this woman, Anne, who was hiding inside the shell of Clara. He picked up the rifle stock. He began to rub it with the oiled cloth. I went to war in 1861, he said, his voice flat, conversational, as if she had just remarked on the weather. I thought I was doing something right, fighting for the Union, fighting to free men who were called property. He did not look at her. He kept his eyes on his hands. I fought for 4 years. I saw men blown apart. I saw boys younger than me starve to death in their own filth. I did things. I killed men. I killed boys who looked like they should be fishing with a stick. I came back home to Ohio in 1865. I walked all the way from Virginia. He paused, a shadow crossing his face. When I left, I had a fiancée. Her name was Abigail. I wrote to her every month. For 4 years. When I got back, I was not the man who left. I had a limp. I had this. He touched a long, puckered scar on his neck. And I had ghosts. I could not sleep in a bed. I could not stand a loud noise. I got to her house, my house, our house. It was fine. The paint was fresh. There was smoke from the chimney. And my brother was on the porch. Marcus, he was holding a baby. Her baby. She had married him, Eli said, his voice void of all emotion. They got my letters. They also got a letter from the War Department. Said I was dead, killed at Cold Harbor. They mourned me for a year, and then life went on. My own brother. He stopped, his hands white on the rifle. She came out, Abigail. She saw me, and she cried. She did not cry because I was alive. Anne, she cried because I was there. I had come back, and I had ruined everything. He put the rifle down. I did not stay. I sold my share of the land to Marcus for $10. I turned around and I walked away. I walked until I ran out of country. Until I got here. This cabin. This is it. This is what's left. Eli Thorne. A man with no one left. He looked up. He finally met her eyes. "We all got names we're wearing, Anne," he said, "and we all got debts that'll never be paid. You can scrub the floor, or you can sit by the fire. It makes no difference to me. But you are not property." He stood, gathered the pieces of his rifle, and went outside, leaving her alone with his story, and her own. The air changed. The confessions had not cleared it. They had thickened it. But it was a new atmosphere. The cabin, which had felt like a trap, now felt like a refuge. They were two people in the world, marked and scarred, hiding in plain sight. She began to use her name. "My name is Anne," she said to the fire one night, practicing the sound. Eli just nodded, but he began to call her Anne, and when he said it, it sounded like her own. The horse, Scab, had picked up a bad wound during the storm. He had panicked in the lean-to and torn his flank open on a nail. The wound was high on his ribs, a long, ugly gash that festered in the cold. Eli had been tending it, but it was awkward. One afternoon, the sun was high and the air was still. Eli led the horse out into the weak warmth. "I need to clean this proper," he said. "It's going sour." Anne followed him. "What do you need?" "Hot water, salt, and another pair of hands. He'll kick if I'm not careful." She brought the steaming bucket and a stack of clean rags. Eli had already unbuttoned his heavy flannel shirt, the wool itching him as he worked. He grunted, pulling at his undershirt, and finally stripped it off, tossing it over the fence rail. Anne stopped. His back was to her. It was a map of old violence. A long, silver scar ran from his left shoulder blade down to his ribs. The mark of a saber, lower near his waist, was a puckered, star-shaped scar, the entry point of a mini-ball. He was lean, but corded with muscle, his skin pale against the dark, raised marks of his past. He turned, unaware of her gaze, and dipped a rag in the hot, briny water. "Hold his head," Eli said. "Just talk to him. Keep him steady." Anne went to the gelding's head, stroking the soft place on his nose. "Easy, boy," she murmured. "Easy now." Eli knelt and pressed the hot rag to the horse's flank. Scab snorted, stamped, and shied, his body slamming against Eli, pushing him back. "Whoa," Eli said, his voice a low rumble, keeping his hand on the horse. "Easy, Scab. I know it hurts. Easy." He tried again. The horse kicked out. A short, warning strike. "He won't let me," Eli said, frustrated. "Let me," Anne said. Her voice was firm. "He'll kick you. Hold the bucket," she commanded, echoing his words from earlier. Eli, surprised, did as he was told. Anne took a fresh rag. She dipped it, wrung it out. She did not approach the wound directly. She kept talking to the horse. That low, soft murmur. She touched his neck, his shoulder, his back, and then her hand, with the rag, moved to the wound. She pressed. The horse trembled, a great, shuddering sigh, but he did not kick. Eli watched her. Her face was a mask of concentration. She was not afraid of the animal, or the pus, or the pain. She was gentle, but firm. She cleaned the wound with a thoroughness that was almost tender. Eli moved, coming to stand beside her, to take the dirty rag. He was close. The heat from his body steamed in the cold air. She reached for the clean rag in his hand. Their fingers brushed. She looked up. He was right there. Her eyes, which had been on the horse, now saw the man. She saw the scar on his neck, and her gaze traveled down. Her eyes landed on the star-shaped scar on his side, near his ribs. He was breathing hard from the effort. She did not mean to. Her hand, the one not holding the rag, came up. She touched it. Her fingers, chapped and cold, rested in the center of the puckered skin. Eli sucked in a sharp breath. He did not move. He did not breathe. She did not pull away. It was the first time she had touched him by choice. It was not an accident. It was not for comfort. It was a question. Her fingers traced the ruined skin, feeling the hard ridge of tissue beneath. She was reading the story his body told. He watched her face. Her eyes were not afraid. They were not disgusted. They were sad. She understood. A silent, profound understanding passed between them. In that moment, they were not a man and a woman. They were two survivors, comparing wounds. She finally pulled her hand back. She took the clean rag from him. "I'm finished," she said softly. Turning back to the horse, Eli let out the breath he had been holding. He felt undone. He turned away and put his shirt back on. His hands were shaking. That night, the cabin felt smaller, but not in a bad way. It was full. The lamplight cast a warm, golden circle. Eli was oiling his boots. Anne was sewing, mending the tear in the shirt he had just taken off. Her dark hair was loose, clean, and falling over her shoulders. She had used the mended comb. She was quiet for a long time, the only sound the snick of the needle pulling the thread. "Thank you," she said, so softly he almost missed it. He looked up from his boot. "For what? The thread?" For not sending me away." She would not look at him. She kept sewing. "For the comb, for letting me help with scab, for not looking at me like I'm broken." He put the boot down. He crossed the small room in 2 strides. He knelt in front of her. She flinched. Her old reflex. He did not touch her. He just waited. Slowly, she raised her eyes. "Anne," he said, his voice rough. He reached out, his hand moving with painful slowness. He did not touch her face. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her temple. She trembled, but did not pull back. "You don't have to speak what hurts," he said, his gaze locked with hers. "I can see it already." He stayed there, kneeling, for a long moment, his hand lingering near her hair. Then he stood, went back to his boots, and the silence returned. But this time, it was a comfortable one. The walls of the cabin were thin. The wind found every crack. The cold was a constant, creeping enemy. They began to exist in each other's space. One afternoon, making bread, they stood side by side at the table. Their hands were both in the flour bin at the same time. His large, scarred hand brushed her small, chapped one. They both recoiled. A spark of heat in the cold flour. Then, slowly, deliberately, Eli put his hand back. She did not move hers. They stayed there for a second, a truce, before gathering the flour. The real change came with the second storm. It was not a blizzard, but a fierce, 2-day gale that screamed down from the mountains. The temperature plummeted. The fire, no matter how high Eli built it, could not heat the corners of the room. The first night, he slept on his mat by the fire. She slept on the cot. He woke near midnight to the sound of her teeth chattering. "You're freezing," he said into the dark. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice shaking. "The cot's too far from the fire. The draft from the window is hitting you straight on." He stood. He grabbed his mat. "What are you doing?" she asked, alarmed. "I'm sleeping by the door. You take the hearth." "No, I will not. It's your—" "I'm fine. Don't be a fool. Anne." He dragged his mat and his coat to the hearth. "Take this spot. It's the only warm place in the room." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she got up from the cot. She came to the fire, wrapped in the blanket. She looked at the small space he had cleared. "There is room for 2, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up at her. It was not an invitation. It was a statement of fact, a practical solution to a practical problem. He nodded, a short, curt motion. He lay down on his mat. She lay down beside him, on the stones. She kept a careful, respectable distance. Eli took his canvas coat and laid it over her, on top of the blanket. "Good night, Eli. Good night, Anne." They lay like 2 logs, side by side, listening to the wind howl. Sometime, in the deep. Cold hours before dawn. He woke. He woke because the shivering beside him had stopped. He woke because he was warm. She had turned in her sleep, unconsciously seeking the heat of his body. Her back was pressed against his side, her head was on his shoulder. His arm, by pure, sleepy instinct, had come up. It was draped over her, his hand resting on her shoulder, holding the blanket in place. Her breathing was deep, even, and safe. He lay awake for an hour, his heart pounding a slow, heavy beat against his ribs. He felt her breath on his neck. He smelled the faint, clean scent of lye soap in her hair. He felt a sharp, terrible ache, a longing. He did not move. He did not dare. In the morning, he woke before her. He slipped his arm away, slow as molasses. He got up, rebuilt the fire, and was outside checking the woodpile when she finally stirred. They did not speak of it, but the next night, she did not go to the cot. She went straight to the hearth, and he lay down beside her. He saw her smile. It was 3 days later. She was tossing grain to the half-dozen chickens he kept. A brave, yellow chick leaped and snatched a kernel from her hand. A sound came from her, a small, rusty sound, a laugh. It transformed her. The lines of fear and sorrow on her face eased. For a single second, she was not Clara, the victim, or Anne, the survivor. She was just a woman, laughing at a chicken. Eli was splitting wood. The axe stopped in mid-swing. He watched her, and the ache he felt in the night returned, tenfold. Her smile faded as soon as she saw him watching. The guilt rushed in, wiping it clean. She turned away, her shoulders slumping. He knew what she was feeling. He saw it in himself. How could he feel this warmth? After Abigail? After Marcus? How could she feel safe? After the rancher? The guilt was a poison, but the tenderness, his tenderness, was the antidote, and it made her ache. He could see it. She was thawing, and thawing hurt. That night, they lay on the hearth. The storm was long gone. The floor was cold, but this was their place now. He was almost asleep. The fire was down to embers. Eli? Her voice was a wisp of sound in the dark. I'm here. Am I still a woman? He turned his head on the rolled-up coat he used as a pillow. He could see her silhouette against the red glow of the coals. It was a devastating question. He knew what she was asking. Am I ruined? Am I dirty? Am I only what he made me? Can I ever be whole? He had no words. Words were lies. Words were what the rancher used. Words were what the War Department used. So he did not speak. He reached out. He found her hand. It was lying on the blanket between them, cold and stiff. He wrapped his own, warm and rough, around it. She did not pull away. He lifted her hand. He brought it to his lips. He kissed the back of it, a chaste, reverent press of his lips against her cold knuckles. It was a kiss of respect. Then, he leaned closer. The small room was dark. She could only feel his movement, feel the warmth of his breath. He kissed her brow, right at the hairline, where the stray hairs wisped. It was a kiss that demanded nothing. It was a kiss of safety, a promise, a benediction. He lay back down, but he did not let go of her hand. He pulled it to his chest, holding it there, over his own steady heartbeat. He slid his other arm under her head, cradling her. He held her, loose and secure, until he felt the tension leave her body. He held her until her breathing deepened, and she finally, truly, slept. The cabin had become a world, a small, pine-scented, fire-warmed world of two. They moved around each other with a new, quiet grace. The invisible line that had separated them, his hearth, her cot, had been erased. They slept on the floor by the fire, a shared space of blankets and coats. He still held her hand until she slept, a nightly ritual that felt as necessary as breathing. But the world outside was still there, waiting. And their supplies were not endless. The salt was gone. The flour sack was almost flat. The coffee tin held only a few dark, precious beans. Eli had been stretching it, reusing the grounds, but now it was just brown water. I have to go, he said one morning, looking at the empty sack. Anne, who was stirring a thin porridge of cornmeal, froze. Her back was to him, but he saw her shoulders lock. Go where? Trapper's hut, down by the Sweetwater. It's 2 days' ride, southeast. Old Jed. He keeps stores. I trade him pelts for salt and lead. 2 days, she said. It was not a question. It was a sentence. 2 days there, 2 days back. And the time in between. I'll ride hard, he said, his voice flat. He did not like it. He did not like leaving her. The silence of the cabin had become his peace, and she was the center of it. But a man had to eat. I'll take Scab. Be back in 4 days. 5, if the melt is bad. She turned. Her face was pale. Let me come. No. His answer was too fast, too sharp. He softened his tone. The ride is hard. The horse is still healing. I'll be faster alone. You'll be safer here. Safer, she repeated, her voice hollow. Aye, safer. He touched the door frame, his hand brushing the new bar he had installed. Bar this door behind me. Do not open it for any man, not Jed, not God himself, only me. You'll know my knock. He tapped it out on the wood. Thump, 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 thump. You hear me? I hear you, she whispered. He packed his bedroll, a pouch of dried meat, his rifle, and extra ammunition. He felt her eyes on him, a constant, fearful weight. He stood at the door, his hat in his hand. He looked at her. She looked small, swallowed by his old shirt, her hair pulled back, her eyes wide and dark. He wanted to. He did not know what he wanted. He wanted to tell her to not be afraid. But that was a lie. The world was a fearful place. Instead, he just nodded. 4 days, he stepped out. He did not look back. He heard the heavy wooden thud of the bar falling into place behind him. It sounded final. It sounded like a cage door closing. The ride was hard. The land was a sea of mud, the snow lingering only in the high places, the gullies, and the north-facing slopes. Scab, his horse, was strong and seemed to like the work, but Eli's mind was not on the trail. It was in the cabin. He thought of her, alone. He thought of her nightmares. He thought of her, barricaded, waiting for a knock. He rode with a knot in his gut, a cold, hard stone of anxiety. He had been alone for 5 years. He had forgotten what it felt like to have something to lose. He reached the trapper's hut late on the second day. It was not a hut. It was a glorified hole in the ground, a dugout burrowed into the side of a hill, banked with sod and roofed with logs and mud. A thin tendril of smoke rose from a rusty stovepipe. A half-dozen half-wild dogs erupted, barking and snarling. As he approached, "Get on!" a voice like a rusted hinge croaked. "Down, you devils! Get—" Jedediah Jed Stiles emerged from the hole. He was a small, leathery man who looked as if he had been carved from the same mud as his house. He was draped in mismatched furs and smelled of beaver scat and stale whiskey. "Thorn," he grunted, spitting a stream of brown tobacco juice onto the mud. "Figured the snow had you." "Jed." Eli nodded. "Dismounting." "Dogs look fed." "Fools came through," Jed said, squinting at Scab. "Ate a whole deer I had curing." Eli stiffened, his hand on his saddlebag. "Fools." "Aye. 3 of 'em." Jed shuffled over, his eyes on the supplies Eli was untying. "Rich men, or plain at it, clean boots, new rifles, looking for something." Eli's blood went cold. He focused on his knots, his fingers slow and deliberate. "Is that so? What's a rich man looking for out here? Gold?" "Ha!" Jed cackled. "Worse, a woman." Eli's hand stopped. He did not look up. He forced his fingers to move, to untie the strap. "A woman? Lost their way?" "Stolen," Jed said, moving closer. He lowered his voice, the gossip's confidential rasp. "A little thing. They said, dark hair, blue dress. Said she was a thief, stole a horse, stole a pile of jewelry from one of them, a necklace. He said, worth $1,000. Eli grunted. He swung his saddlebags, heavy with pelts, over his shoulder. "Sounds like a story." "Don't it?" Jed grinned, revealing 3 yellow teeth. The one leading him, a big man, Name of, starts with a B, Brogan? No, Barrett. Mr. Barrett. He was real particular. Said she was property. His word, said she was an indentured girl who broke her bond. Eli shouldered the bag. And you told him? You seen her? Me? Jed looked offended. I told him nothing. I ain't seen nothing but mud and coyote scat for 6 months. I let 'em eat their fill. I took their coin for the meal, and I pointed 'em west, toward the pass. Good riddance. They were soft. This land'll eat 'em. Eli walked past him, ducking into the dim, smoky dugout. It stank. Furs were piled everywhere. I need salt, Eli said, his voice hard. And flour, and coffee, and all the lead you have. He did not bargain. He did not haggle. He paid Jed's outrageous prices with his best pelts, his hands moving fast. He took a bottle of whiskey, too. He did not drink, but he needed it. He needed something. He stayed the night. He could not, in good conscience, ride through the dark. He lay in his bedroll, in the corner of the stinking dugout, his pistol in his hand. The dogs whined outside. Jed snored like a dying buffalo. A necklace worth $1,000. A thief, dark hair, blue dress, property. He did not sleep. He saw her face. He saw the terror in her eyes the day he found her. He saw the way she flinched from his touch. He saw her, kneeling, scrubbing his floor. He was on the horse before the sun was a gray smudge in the east. In a hurry? Jed called from his doorway. Always, Eli said. He kicked Scab into a trot, and then a hard, punishing run. He made it back in a day and a half. He rode the horse into the ground. He did not care. He left Scab, lathered and blowing, in the corral, and stalked to the cabin. He was a fool. He had not thought. He pounded on the door. There was silence. "Anne!" he yelled, his voice raw. He heard a frightened scramble. Who is it?" Her voice was thin, terrified. He cursed himself. He was the monster, banging on her door. He stepped back. He knocked. Thump, 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 thump. He waited. He heard the heavy bar being lifted, the scrape of wood on wood. The door opened a crack. Her eye, wide and white, appeared. She saw him. She sagged, her hand on the door. "Eli?" She opened the door. He pushed past her. He was covered in mud. He was exhausted. He was radiating a cold, dark anger. He threw the sacks on the table. Salt, flour, coffee. She looked at him. He looked different. He was not the man who had left. The gentle, quiet distance was gone. He was coiled, tight, his eyes hard as flint. "You're back," she said, her voice small. "You're early." "I rode hard," he said. He unbuckled his gun belt and laid it on the table. He took his rifle from his shoulder. He did not put it on the pegs by the door. He leaned it against the table, right by his hand. He went to the fire. He took the bottle of whiskey from his saddlebag. He uncorked it and took a long, burning pull. "Eli?" she asked. He did not look at her. "There were men at Jed's, looking for you." The world stopped. All the air left the cabin. Anne's blood turned to ice water. She could not move. She could not breathe. What did they say?" she whispered. "They said you were a thief," he said, his voice flat. He took another drink. "They said you stole a horse and a necklace." She did not deny it. She could not. She wrapped her arms around herself. "They said you were property," he said. She made a small, broken sound. He turned. He finally looked at her. His face was a mask she did not recognize. It was cold, closed. His eyes were not the eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness. They were the eyes of a judge. He did not say, "Is it true?" He did not have to. She saw it all. She saw the change. He knew she was dirty. He knew she was a thief. He knew she was his property, his distance, the care he had taken. She had mistaken it for kindness. It was just caution. He had been waiting, and now he knew. He was not angry. He was quiet. This was worse. This was the quiet of a man who had made a decision. That night, The space between them was a frozen river. He did not speak. He ate the food she cooked, his eyes on his plate. He cleaned his rifle. He reloaded his pistol. When it was time to sleep, she went to the hearth, to their spot. He picked up his mat. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaking. He walked to the door. He laid the mat down on the floorboards, right in front of it, blocking the entrance. He laid his rifle down beside him. "Sleeping," he said. He was not sleeping with her. He was sleeping by the door. He was guarding her. Or was he guarding himself from her? Or was he keeping her in? She did not know. The panic was a living thing, clawing its way up her throat. He was going to turn her in. He had brought back salt and flour. He was a good man, an honest man. And she was a thief. She was a liar. She had brought this danger, this filth, into his home. Of course he would turn her in. It was the law. She lay by the fire, alone, her body shaking. She did not sleep. She listened to him. He was not sleeping either. He lay on his mat, a dark shape in the darkness, unmoving. He was just waiting. For 2 days, they lived like this, in the cold, terrible silence. He was polite. He was distant. He chopped wood. He tended the horse. He spoke only when he had to. Pass the salt. The water's low. And he slept by the door. Anne's mind began to fracture. The terror was worse than the cold. It was worse than the rancher. Because this was a hope. Dying, he was waiting for them. The men, he would trade her. He would trade her for his peace, for the $10 he had sold his life for. On the third night, she could not bear it. He lay on his mat. The fire was low. The cabin was dark. She got up. She walked, her bare feet silent on the floorboards, until she was standing over him. He was not asleep. His eyes were open. He was looking at her. "Let me go," she whispered. He did not move. "What? Let me go," she said, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "Please, I will not bring them here. I will not bring this on you. Just let me go, quietly, in the night." She was begging. "I'll go north. I'll walk. They will not find me, and they will not find you. You can tell them I was never here. You can tell them I left. You can have your home back." She was crying, the tears hot on her cold face. "I am sorry. Eli, I am so sorry. I brought this. Please, just let me leave. Before I what?" His voice was a low growl. "Before you turn me in." He was silent. The silence stretched, heavy and cold. Then he stood. He moved so fast she did not have time to flinch. He did not grab her. He did not touch her. He just rose. He was a mountain of shadow and rage in the dim firelight. He was taller than she remembered. He was more solid. "Turn you in," he said. His voice was shaking, not with cold, with a fury so profound it vibrated in the air. "Is that what you think of me? After all this?" "I am a thief," she cried. I am his property. The law says so." "The law?" He spat. "The law said I was dead. The law says a man can beat his wife. The law. The law is a whore, paid by men like him." He stepped toward her. She stepped back, hitting the table. "I don't care about the horse," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't care about the necklace. I care about the truth. I told you the truth." "You told me half," he said. "You told me what you thought I could stomach. You did not tell me what I am fighting. I am not. I don't—" "What do you want?" she sobbed. "I want the whole truth." "Anne," he demanded. He was not asking. "He said you stole a necklace worth $1,000. He said you were property. He is hunting you. He will not stop. Now you tell me why. You tell me all of it." She broke, the dam of her fear, her shame, her silence. It shattered. "I did not steal it," she screamed, the word tearing from her throat. I did not. It was my mother's. It was all I have left of her. She slid down, her back against the table leg, and huddled on the floor. She was weeping, great, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. He said he was going to marry me, she choked out. After weeks of what he did, in the night, he came to my room. He had a priest, a drunk man in a collar. He had a ring. He said he would make me an honest woman. He said I would be Mrs. Barrett. He said I would learn to like it. She was rocking, her arms wrapped around her knees. And he had my necklace. He had taken it from my things. He was going to give it to me, as a gift, as a wedding gift. My own mother's locket. I hit him, she whispered. I hit him with the water pitcher. He fell. I grabbed it. I grabbed the necklace. And I ran. I ran to the stable. I took the first horse I saw. I ran. She finished. She was empty. She was a hollowed-out, shaking wreck on his cabin floor. She waited. For the disgust. For the final judgment. Eli stood above her. He was shaking. His hands were clenched into fists, the knuckles white. He looked at her, this small, broken thing, and he did not see a thief. He did not see property. He saw the war. He saw the strong preying on the weak. He saw the same ugly, evil thing he had been fighting his entire life. He knelt, not like before. He knelt in front of her, his knees cracking on the floorboards. His voice, when he spoke, was not anger. It was a vow. It was thick. It was shaking. You're not the thief, Anne, he said. He is. He reached out. His hands, calloused and hard, cupped her face. He made her look at him. His eyes were not cold. They were burning. He is, Eli repeated. He stole your name. He stole your peace. He tried to steal your mother. You are not the thief. He is. He pulled her up. He did not lift her. He pulled her into his arms. He held her, his arms locked around her, her face pressed against the rough wool of his shirt. And I promise you, he whispered into her hair, his voice breaking, I promise you, on whatever soul I have left, I will not let anyone take you again. She clung to him. She burrowed into him. She wept into his chest, a lifetime of fear and pain and loneliness pouring out of her. He held her. He just held her. He did not rock her. He did not soothe her. He just held her. He was an anchor. He was a wall. He was the first solid thing she had touched in a year. They stayed like that for a long time. The fire burned down to red-orange embers. The cabin grew cold. Finally, her sobs lessened. They quieted. She was still trembling, a leaf in a storm. She pulled back, just enough to look at him. Her face was a ruin, streaked with tears, her eyes swollen. But she was looking at him, really looking. I am so cold, she had said to him, all those weeks ago. Now, she looked at him, the man who had burned his wood for her, the man who had slept by her side, the man who was now offering to stand between her and the world. She asked him, her voice a raw whisper, Am I allowed to feel warmth again? He did not answer with words. He looked at her. He saw her, all of her, the bruises, the shame, the strength, the fear. He kissed her. It was not the chaste, safe kiss on her hand. It was not the benediction on her brow. It was a vow. He kissed her mouth. It was slow. It was reverent. His lips were chapped. He tasted of whiskey and salt and sorrow. She tasted of tears. It was a kiss of terrible, aching need, a need for comfort, a need for life. He kissed her, and it was a promise. You are not broken. You are not property. You are mine. And she kissed him back, a desperate, drowning kiss. I am not his. I am not a thief. I am here. He lifted her. She was light in his arms. He carried her the few steps to their bed of blankets by the fire. He laid her down gently. He did not take. He asked. He brushed the hair from her face. Anne, He whispered, "Yes." She said. It was the only word. Yes. Their bodies came together. It was slow. It was hesitant. It was reverent. Every touch was a question. Every caress was an answer. There were tears. Hers and his. He touched her as if she were made of spun glass, as if she were a holy thing he had found in the mud. He touched the scars on her back, the bruises he could still see in his mind's eye. And she touched him. She touched the saber scar on his back. She touched the puckered bullet wound in his side. It was not a joining of two bodies. It was a joining of two wounds, two solitudes. Two broken, beaten, and bruised souls, finding the one, whole, perfect thing in each other. It was trembling, and it was tears, and it was, in the end, a profound, shuddering peace. Afterward, in the deep, quiet dark, he held her. She was tucked against his chest, his arms locked around her. And she cried. She had not cried after he took her from the snow. She had not cried when he fixed her comb. She had not cried when he held her hand. She had sobbed from fear. She had wept from sorrow. This was different. This was a release, the breaking of the ice, the thawing of a frozen, desolate land. She cried, silently, her body shaking, the tears running hot onto his skin. She was crying out the poison, the shame, the rancher, the cold. He held her through it. He stroked her hair. He whispered her name. Anne, Anne, I'm here. I'm here. When the last sob had left her, when she was just a quiet, trembling warmth in his arms, he kissed the top of her head. He said, his voice a low, rough thing in the dark. You're not broken, just bruised, and I can wait. I can wait for every part of you. She gripped his shirt, her fist tightening over his heart, and for the first time since her father died, she fell asleep, truly, deeply, safely. He did not sleep. He lay awake, holding her, his rifle by the door, but he was not guarding against her. He was guarding for her. He watched the fire die, and he waited for the dawn. He knew, with a terrible, cold certainty, that the men would come, and he would be ready. The morning after, the cabin was a different place. It was no longer a refuge. It was a home. The air, which had been thick with unspoken things, was now still, quiet, and warm. When Anne woke, Eli was already by the fire, but he was not cleaning his rifle. He was watching her. He had made coffee, real coffee, from the beans he had brought back. The rich, dark smell filled the room. He handed her a tin mug. Their fingers brushed. She did not flinch. She smiled. A small, sleepy, and genuine smile that reached her eyes. Thank you. Eli, she said. Anne, he said, just testing the name in this new world. It was a joy so fragile it was almost a pain. They sat in silence, drinking the coffee, listening to the drip of the meltwater outside. They were two people, breathing the same air, their future a terrifying, beautiful blank page. He saw her glance at the cracked mirror by the door, and this time she did not look away. The fragile peace lasted 3 hours. When the coffee was gone, Eli pulled on his boots. I need to check the corral. The north rail looked loose. I'll clean the mugs, she said, and the simple, domestic sound of it made his heart ache. He stepped outside. The air was cold, but the sun was bright. The snow was retreating, leaving behind a world of brown mud and damp, pale grass. He walked to the corral, his rifle left, for the first time, inside by the door. The rail was not loose. It was broken. He stopped, 10 feet away. It was not a rot. It was not a break from the weight of the snow. It was a clean snap. The pale wood of the inner break sharp against the gray, weathered outside. Someone had kicked it, or broken it with a rifle butt. He scanned the mud. Tracks, not his, not hers. 2 sets of boot prints. Shod horses, a man's heavy tread. They were fresh. They had come from the south, circled the cabin, and stopped at the corral. They had tested his defenses. He looked up, his eyes going to the high ground, the ridge to the west, The one that overlooked his small valley? He had hunted from there. You could see everything, the door, the window, the lean-to. He did not go back inside. He did not call her. He became the man he had been in the war, a shadow. He moved low and fast, using the creek bed for cover, his boots silent in the soft mud. He circled wide, coming up on the ridge from the north, from the blind side. He crawled the last 50 yards on his belly, the cold mud soaking his shirt, his knife in his hand. He eased his head over the crest, through a patch of withered juniper. He saw them. 2 men. They were hunkered down, just below the summit, their horses tethered behind them. They had a spyglass. They wore new, clean canvas coats and wide-brimmed hats. They were not trappers. They were not drifters. They were hired men. One of them was pointing the spyglass directly at his cabin. They were watching. They were waiting. They knew she was there. They were waiting for him to leave. Or perhaps they were waiting for the third man, the one Jed had called Mr. Barrett. Eli's blood was ice. He slid backward, inch by inch, until he was below the ridgeline. He did not run. He walked, silent and fast, back through the creek bed. He came through the door. Anne was humming, a small, tuneless sound. As she swept the hearth, she looked up, her face bright. The brightness died when she saw his face. It was stone. It was cold. It was the face of the man who had found her. But all the gentleness was gone. "What is it?" she whispered. "Get your coat," Eli said. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain. He walked to the table and began to pack. He moved with a terrifying, economical speed. He took the sack of flour and dumped half of it onto a strip of canvas. He added salt, the last of the dried meat, and his extra ammunition. He rolled it tight. He grabbed the new sack of coffee. He took the furs from the wall, the ones he had not traded. "Eli, you're frightening me. What is wrong?" "They're here," he said. He looked at her, and his gaze was hard, not with anger at her, but at the world. 2 men, on the ridge, armed. She did not cry. She did not panic. All the color drained from her face, but she nodded. She walked to the peg, took down her coat, his old one, and put it on. She picked up the mended comb from the table and shoved it deep into her pocket. "What do? We leave, now!" He tied the bedroll. He grabbed his rifle. He took the blanket from their bed on the hearth. "When we go out, stay behind me. Get on the horse. Do not look back." He opened the door. He scanned the ridge. The men were still there. They had not seen him. They were watching the front. He was taking them out the back. He led Scab from the lean-to. The horse was strong, fed, and rested. Eli threw the blanket over the horse's back. Then the saddle. He tied the rolls on. "They'll see us," Anne whispered, her eyes fixed on the ridge. "Aye, when we clear the creek, we'll have a lead. They'll have to get to their horses." He put his foot in the stirrup and swung up. He held his hand down. "Come." She put her foot on his, and he hauled her up, seating her behind him. She was light. She wrapped her arms around his waist, her hands clutching the front of his coat. He could feel her shivering, or perhaps he was shivering. "Hold on," he said. He kicked Scab. The horse leaped forward, not toward the trail, but away from it, up toward the highlands, toward the raw, snow-covered peaks of the high country. They rode for an hour before he heard the shots. 2 of them, sharp cracks in the cold, thin air. They were far behind. A warning, or just frustration. They were in the highlands now. The mud had given way to deep, rotten snow. The air was thin and bit at the lungs. The wind was a constant, high-pitched scream. It found every gap in their clothing. Anne was pressed against his back. He could feel the cold of her seeping into him. He was a wall, breaking the wind for her. But the wind was everywhere. It was a living, malicious thing. They rode all day. Scab was a good horse. He was strong, bred for the mountains, but the terrain was brutal. They climbed, following game trails, fording half-frozen streams that soaked them to the bone. The sun vanished. swallowed by a low, gray, churning sky. Snow began to fall. Not the soft, blanketing snow of the blizzard. This was a hard, stinging sleet, driven by the wind. Needles of ice that cut at their exposed skin. By dusk, they were in a different world. A world of rock, ice, and screaming wind. Scab was stumbling, his breath coming in great, ragged, frosty plumes. Eli's legs were numb. He could not feel Anne's hands on his coat anymore, but he could feel the dead weight of her body leaning against him. "We have to stop," he yelled over the wind. "We have to find shelter." He peered through the swirling gray. There, a shadow, a darkness in the rock face, darker than the stone. "Hold on," he said again. He urged the horse the last 100 yards, toward the black slit in the rock. It was an old mining claim, a test shaft, abandoned decades ago. It was not a home. It was a hole, but it was out of the wind. He slid from the saddle. His legs buckled. He was stiff, frozen. He stamped his feet, forcing the blood to move. He reached up for Anne. She did not move. "Anne!" She was slumped, her head against his back. "Anne!" He grabbed her by the waist and pulled her down. She was a dead weight. She fell into his arms, her head lolling. She was unconscious. Her skin, where it peeked from her scarf, was a pale, waxy gray. He carried her into the cave. It was shallow, perhaps 20 feet deep. The floor was stone and gravel. It was lightless, and it was colder than the air outside. The rock held a deep, profound chill. He laid her down. He unstrapped his bedroll, his fingers clumsy, numb. He rolled her in the furs, in the blanket. He left Scab tethered just outside the mouth of the cave, a dark, miserable shape against the snow. He needed fire. He had his flint and steel. He had a small bundle of kindling he always carried. But the cave was bare rock. There was no wood, no brush, nothing. Anne began to shiver. A violent, rattling tremor that shook her whole body. "That's it," Eli said, his voice raw. Good, girl. You fight." He tore open his canvas pack. The flour, the coffee, the salt, all useless. He had 2 extra fur pelts, beaver, thick and oiled. He had a small sack of dried apples. He had his spare shirt. He pulled his knife. He began to shave the wood from the handle of his axe. He built a small pile of tinder. He struck the flint. A spark caught, a tiny, fragile flame. He fed it scraps of his canvas pack. He fed it the dried apples. They sputtered, then caught, a sugary, smoking flare. Anne's shivering was weakening. It was becoming sporadic. This was the danger. The body giving up. He looked at the small, struggling fire. He looked at the furs. They were his profit, his trade, his life, his name as a trapper. He took one of the thick, oily beaver pelts and, with his knife, began to cut it into strips. He fed a strip to the fire. It caught, the oil and hair hissing, producing a thick, acrid smoke, but also a hot, bright, greasy flame. He built the fire, strip by strip, feeding his livelihood to the flames. He stripped off his own coat and laid it over her. He huddled beside her, pulling the furs tighter, trying to force his own body heat into hers. She was cold, so cold. "I'd burn my name if it meant you lived," he whispered, his voice cracking. He fed another strip of beaver pelt to the fire. The flames leaped, casting grotesque, dancing shadows on the cave walls. "I'd burn it all." She was delirious. She turned her head, her eyes closed, her lips blue. "No," she whimpered. The sound was thin, like a bat's cry. "No, please, the door. Don't let him lock the door. It's so dark." She was back there, back in that house, with Barrett. "Anne," Eli said, his voice rough. He grabbed her shoulder. "Anne, you're not there. You're here. You're with me." "It's cold," she whispered, a tear freezing on her cheek. "I'm so cold. He's coming." "He is not," Eli said. He gripped her face, his thumbs on her frozen cheeks. "He will not touch you. You are not his." He leaned his forehead against hers. "You're mine." The word hung in the smoky air. It was not the word of a master. It was not property. It was the word of a desperate, drowning man finding his one. Solid rock. Mine. He held her all night. He fed the fire with his furs, his spare shirt, the leather straps from his saddlebags. He forced water, melted from the snow, between her lips. He held her when she trembled, and he held her when she was terrifyingly still. The fever broke with the dawn. The storm had passed. A weak, gray light filtered into the cave. Anne's eyes opened. They were cloudy, confused, but they were her. She looked at him. He was a wreck. His face was gray with exhaustion, black with soot from the greasy fire. His beard was frosted with his own breath. He was slumped over her, his arms still locked around her. She looked past him, at the fire. It was a smoking pile of black, greasy ash. Beside it, she saw the ruined scraps of his pack. She understood. "Eli," she whispered. Her throat was raw. "I'm here," he breathed, relief flooding him so hard it made him dizzy. You burned. It's just things," he said. "It's just things." She was weak. She slept, a real, healing sleep. He dozed beside her, his hand on her chest, feeling the slow, steady rise and fall of her breath. They stayed in the cave for 2 days. They ate the flour, mixed with water, a cold, raw paste, but they were alive. On the second day, her strength returned. She could sit up. The color was back in her face. The world was reduced to this small, cold, smoky hole. The wind howled outside. The pursuers were somewhere, lost in the snow. Death was outside, and in the cave, there was life. She looked at him. He was tending the horse, rubbing him down, his back to her. He was lean, hard, and exhausted. He had burned his world for her. The air between them was electric. It was not the slow, reverent warmth of the cabin. This was something else. This was the desperate, raw hunger of 2 people who had almost died, who were still being hunted. That night, he lay beside her, sharing the one blanket, the one set of furs. They were pressed close, for warmth, for life. He kissed her. It was not a question. It was a statement. It was rough, his lips hard, his beard scraping her skin. It was the taste of ash and coffee and cold. She kissed him back, her hands gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. This was not a reverent healing. This was fire. It was a rough, desperate, clinging. It was a hunger to live, to feel, to erase the cold. Their bodies came together not with tears, but with a raw, shuddering need. They were not mending each other. They were claiming each other from the cold, from the men, from death itself. They were clinging to each other like the world was ending, and they were the only 2 people left in it. When it was over, they did not speak. They lay tangled, their breath coming in ragged gasps, the steam rising from their bodies in the frigid air. They had to move. They could not stay. The food was gone. They rode for another day, moving slow, saving the horse. The highlands were a white, endless, howling desert. They found it on the 3rd day, an abandoned way station. It had been used for the mail, back before the railroad. It was a sod house, mostly, with 4 collapsing log walls and a roof that was half gone, but it had a stone fireplace and a door. They barricaded themselves inside. Another storm hit, trapping them. This one was worse. A full blizzard that buried the world in white for 3 days. They were trapped, truly trapped. They had shelter, but no food. Eli had managed to shoot a single rabbit before the snow hit. They boiled it, drank the broth, and gnawed the bones. The confinement was absolute. They were 2 people in a single 10 by 10 room, the wind screaming, the snow piling up against the door. They talked. They had nothing else to do. She told him about her brothers. Simple, kind boys who loved to fish. How they were, soft in a way. How her father's drinking had ruined them. Eli sat, his back to the wall, staring into the meager fire. He had been holding it in, since the war. For almost 10 years, he had buried it, under the snow, under the solitude, under the name of Eli Thorne. I killed boys like that. he said. His voice was so low, she barely heard him. What? In the war. He would not look at her. He stared at his hands. I killed boys who looked just like you said. Farm boys. From Georgia. From Carolina. They had no boots. They had gray uniforms that were tearing. They were just boys. He was trembling. We were on a skirmish line. Near Petersburg. It was just a field. And they were coming at us. They were not screaming. They were just walking, crying. Some of them, they were starving. They were 16, 17. They had the same eyes as my brother. Marcus. He stopped. His breath hitched. And I shot them, he whispered. I was a good shot. I did not miss. I shot them, one after another. I killed them all. The confession hung in the air. A terrible black weight. He was not a hero. He was not just a victim. He was a murderer. He was shaking, a deep, profound tremor that came from his soul. Anne looked at him. She saw the man who had burned his livelihood to save her. She saw the man who had confessed his own broken past. And now she saw the man, trembling, destroyed by his own memory. She moved. She slid across the dirt floor. She sat beside him. She did not speak. She put her arms around him. She pulled his head down to her shoulder. He was stiff, resisting. Then he broke. He shuddered, a great, gasping noise, and he clung to her. He was weeping, the silent, racking sobs of a man who had not cried in a decade. She held him. She stroked his hair. She rocked him, gently, as he trembled. She was the anchor. She was the wall. She was his shelter. I know, she whispered into his hair. I know. It's all right. I'm here. I'm here. They stayed like that through the long, dark, howling afternoon. The storm finally broke. The world outside was silent, white, and clean. It was a new page. They stood at the broken doorway of the way station, looking out at the endless expanse of snow. They were alive. They were free, but they were in the middle of nowhere. Where do we go, Eli? She asked, her voice quiet. Where is safe? He looked at her. He took her hand, his fingers, rough and scarred, lacing with hers. You pick the place, he said, his voice rough. You pick it. We go north. We go to Oregon. We go to the sea. It doesn't matter. He squeezed her hand. You just pick the place. I'll build it with bare hands if I have to. They could not live on promises. They could not eat the clean, white snow. The rabbit was a greasy memory, a faint stain in the bottom of the pot. They were starving. The horse, Scab, was worse. He was gnawing the log walls of the way station, desperate for any kind of substance. I have to find something, Eli said. The storm had passed, but the world was a silent, white grave. The horse can't make it. We can't make it. I have to find game. Anne watched him. He was checking his rifle. He had 4 bullets left. 4. I'm coming with you, she said. It was not a request. No, you're still weak, and I only have the 1 rifle. It's not safe. Stay here. Keep the door barred. I'll be back before noon. He looked at her, his eyes hollowed by hunger, but his gaze was still hot. I'll be back. He had made a pair of snowshoes from the broken slats of a bunk he had found in the small station. He strapped them on. He kissed her. It was a hard, fast kiss. It tasted of desperation and a grim promise. Bar the door. He left. She slid the heavy, warped beam of wood into place. She sat by the cold hearth, his knife in her lap, and she began to wait. Eli moved like a ghost across the new world. The snow was deep, up to his waist in places. The snowshoes were clumsy, but they kept him on top. He moved toward a copse of aspen he had spotted from the roof. It was the only cover for miles. If there was life, it would be there. He moved slow. Every sense was on fire. He was not just hunting for food. He was hunting for the men who were hunting him. He saw no tracks, no smoke, no sign. The blizzard had wiped the world clean. He allowed himself a small, cold spark of hope. Maybe they had given up. Maybe the storm had taken them. Maybe they were dead. He reached the aspen grove. It was silent. The thin, pale trees stood like the bones of an army. He moved through them, his eyes scanning for the flick of an ear, the dark shape of a rabbit huddling. He saw it, a snowshoe hare, its white coat almost perfect against the drift. It was 100 yards out, a long shot. But it was food. It was life. He knelt, raising the rifle. He steadied his breathing. His stomach was a cold, empty knot. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from weakness. He steadied the sight on the small, dark eye of the hare. He let out his breath. He did not hear them. The blow came from behind, a rifle butt, hard and heavy, crashed against the side of his head. The world exploded in white light and black pain. He did not hear the shot his own rifle fired, the bullet going harmlessly into the sky. He fell face first into the snow, the taste of blood and powder in his mouth. He was not unconscious for long. He came to, choking, being dragged. 2 men. The same 2 men from the ridge. They were hauling him by his arms through the snow, back toward the way station. His rifle was gone. His knife was gone. Woke up, did he? One of them grunted. He was a thick, bearded man. He kicked Eli in the ribs. Eli gasped, the air leaving his lungs. "Get up," the man said. "Walk, or we'll drag you by your neck." Eli staggered to his feet. His head was a ball of fire. Blood was running into his eye, hot and sticky. The second man, a younger, thinner one with mean, piggish eyes, held a rope. He noosed it, quick and practiced, around Eli's wrists, cinching it tight. "Figured you'd come out," the pig-eyed man said. He had a high, whining voice. "Mister, Barrett said you'd have to eat." They had been waiting. The storm had not taken them. They had hunkered down, better supplied, better equipped, and they had just waited. They knew. Where is he?" Eli slurred. "Tasting the blood." "He'll be here," the bearded one said. "He's not a man for the high country. He waits for us to do the work. Now, move." They pushed him. He stumbled, his clumsy snowshoes catching, until the pig-eyed one cut the bindings with a knife. Eli sank to his hips in the snow. They laughed. They pulled him out by the rope on his hands and forced him to break the trail, his boots plunging, his lungs burning, his head screaming. They reached the way station. "Ann!" Eli roared, his voice cracking. "They're here! Run! Run!" The bearded man hit him again, a backhanded blow across the face that sent him to his knees. "Shut your mouth! She ain't running nowhere!" He hammered on the door. "Clara! We got him! We got your man!" The silence from inside was absolute. "Clara!" the pig-eyed man shrieked. "You come out! You come out now, or we put a bullet in his head! We'll do it! I'll do it right now!" He drew his pistol and pressed the cold, black muzzle to Eli's temple. Eli did not move. He just stared at the door, his heart a cold, dead stone. "Don't do it, Ann!" Eli yelled. "Don't! Ah!" The bearded man kicked him again, a vicious, pointed strike to his kidney. Eli collapsed, vomiting thin, sour bile onto the white snow. "You got 3 seconds! Girl!" the bearded man shouted. 1! "Don't!" Eli gasped. 2! He cocked the hammer of his pistol. The bar scraped, the heavy, warped sound of the wood sliding back. The door opened. Ann stood there. She was pale. She was trembling. She held Eli's skinning knife in her hand, but she was there. She had not run. "No," Eli whispered. "Well now," the pig-eyed man said, a slow, ugly smile spreading across his face. He took the pistol from Eli's head. "Look at that, a little snow-white rabbit, come to save her buck." "Let him go," Ann said. Her voice was a thin, reedy thing, but it did not break. "You have me, let him go." The bearded man laughed. "That's not how this works. Sweetheart, you get inside. We'll wait." He shoved Eli toward the door. "And you!" He untied the rope on Eli's wrists, only to tie them again, brutally tight, in front of him. "You get to watch." They shoved Eli into the sod house. He fell to the floor. Anne ran to him, but the pig-eyed man grabbed her by the hair and threw her back against the far wall. "Don't you touch him," he hissed. They sat. The two men took the last of the food, the raw, frozen piece of rabbit Eli had left. They built a fire, they ate, they drank from a flask, and they waited. It was 2 days. 2 days of hell. Eli was tied, sitting against the wall, his hands bound. Anne was on the other side of the room. They were not allowed to speak. If they looked at each other, the pig-eyed man, whose name was Milt, would walk over and kick Eli. "See?" Milt would say to Anne. "That's you, doing that. Every time you look at him, he gets it." So she stopped looking. She stared at the wall, her face a pale, frozen mask, her hands clenched in her lap. Eli watched. He watched the men. The bearded one, Cobb, was the leader. He was quiet, brutal. Milt was the talker. He was the mean one. He enjoyed the power. Eli did not break. He did not beg. He watched. He watched the way they moved. He watched the way they set their rifles down. He watched the way Milt would get drunk from the flask. He watched the way Cobb's eyes would get heavy as he sat by the fire. He was a prisoner of war. He knew how to wait. On the third morning, a sound. Horses. A lot of them. Cobb stood, his rifle in his hand. "He's here." The door opened. The man who stood there was not a frontiersman. He was a creature of a different world. He was tall and thick in the chest, wearing a fine black wool coat with a beaver fur collar. His hat was clean. His boots were polished. He was handsome, in a heavy, cruel way. His face was clean-shaven. His dark hair was combed. His eyes, blue and cold, scanned the room. They passed over Eli, dismissed him as cattle, and landed on Anne. A slow, terrible smile spread across his face. "Clara," he said. His voice was not rough. It was smooth, educated, and rich. It was the most terrifying sound Eli had ever heard. "My dear, Clara, what a chase you have led me." Anne did not speak. She looked at him, and the hate in her eyes was so profound it was almost a physical force. This is the hovel you chose, Mr. Barrett said, stepping inside. He looked at Eli, still bound on the floor. "This is the man? This half-starved coyote?" He laughed, a rich, full-throated sound. "Oh, my dear, your tastes have fallen. I almost feel insulted." He walked toward her. Anne shrank, pressing herself into the sod wall. "Tisk, tisk," Barrett said. He reached out, his gloved hand touching her face. "Look at you. You're filthy. You're thin. He has not taken care of you at all. Has he?" "Don't touch her," Eli growled from the floor. Barrett's head snapped around. He looked at Eli as if he had just noticed a bug. "Cobb, make it stop talking." Cobb walked over and drove his boot into Eli's stomach. Eli's breath left him in a whoosh of pain. He curled, gagging. "No!" Anne screamed. "Ah, she speaks," Barrett said, turning back to her. "It is a simple transaction, my dear, for him. You come with me. You behave. You become, again, the woman you were supposed to be. And this animal is allowed to live. We will leave him here. He will, likely freeze or starve. But I will not have him shot. That is my gift to you. You are the animal," Anne whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "Am I?" Barrett's smile widened. He knelt in front of her. "I am offering you a life, a fine house, servants, silk dresses, a name, my name. I am, in fact, prepared to forgive everything." He reached into his waistcoat pocket. He pulled out a small, velvet box. "Even your little fit of temper, even your theft, I am prepared to marry you. Right now, I have a ring, a proper one. This time, not that trinket you stole." He opened the box. A diamond, huge and cold, glittered in the dim light. "Marry me now, Clara," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate growl. "Agree to be my wife, and I will let him live." He held it out. They were all watching. Cobb, Milt, Eli, who was pushing himself back up the wall, his face pale, his eyes on fire. Anne looked at the ring. She looked at Barrett's smug, handsome face. She looked at his cold, blue eyes. She saw the man who had locked her door. She saw the man who had called her property. She saw the man who had... She drew a breath, and she spit in his face. A thick, white glob of spittle hit him, right on his clean-shaven cheek. The room went silent. Barrett's face did not move. His smile did not falter. He just stared. Then, very, very slowly, he reached up with his gloved hand and wiped the spittle away. He looked at it. "Cobb," he said, his voice a flat, dead thing. "Take her, tie her, put her on a horse. She will ride with you." He stood. He turned to Milt. Beat him until he is unconscious. Then chain him to the wall. We will leave him here. For the wolves." He turned and walked out of the way station. "No!" Anne shrieked. As Cobb grabbed her, she fought, she kicked, she bit his hand. Cobb roared and backhanded her. She fell, hitting her head on the stone hearth. She did not move. "No," Eli whispered, struggling against his bonds. "Anne." Milt's shadow fell over him. The pig-eyed man was smiling, pulling a set of iron chains from his pack. This is going to be fun." He was not in the way station. He was in a different place, a place of pain. He thought, back in the war, back in the prison camp. He woke. He was in darkness. His head was... It was not a head. It was a ball of agony. His ribs broken. He could feel the sharp edges grate when he breathed. He was chained. A heavy iron manacle was around his right wrist. The chain was bolted to the wall. He was on the dirt floor. They were gone. The way station was empty. The fire was dead. The door was open. A pale gray rectangle of snow. They were gone. They had taken her. "Anne," he whispered. The name was a broken thing in his throat. He pulled. The chain was short. It was old. It was set deep in the wall. The cuff was thick iron. He was going to die here. He was going to... I'll build it with bare hands if I have to. His own voice. His promise. "You're not broken. Just bruised. And I can wait for every part of you. Rage. A rage so pure, so cold, so absolute. It burned away the pain. It burned away the despair." He was not going to die here. He was not a dead man. He was not a victim. He was Eli Thorne. And they had taken his woman. He sat up. The movement sent shards of glass through his ribs. He gritted his teeth, tasting the blood in his mouth. He looked at the chain. He could not break it. He could not pull it from the wall. He looked at the cuff. It was iron. He looked at his hand. It was flesh. It was bone. He looked at the hearth. He began to crawl. He dragged himself, the chain rattling, the 4 feet to the cold fireplace. His hand, he needed a tool. He felt in the ash. His fingers, numb and clumsy, hit something hard. The fire poker. It was a simple, heavy piece of wrought iron. The men had used it. They had left it. He gripped it. His hand, his free hand, was a claw. He pulled himself back to the wall. The chain was bolted at shoulder height. He stood. The world spun. He leaned against the sod wall, his breath coming in shallow, painful gasps. He had one chance. He wedged the pointed end of the poker into the gap of the manacle, between the iron and his skin. He pushed it down, past his wrist, until it was jammed tight. He put his left hand on the poker. He braced his feet. He took a breath, and he tore. He put every ounce of his weight, his life, his rage, into it. He twisted the poker, using it as a lever, prying the iron cuff open. The pain was... It was not pain. It was a white, blinding light. The iron cut. He felt the skin tear. He heard a wet, sickening crunch as the small bones in his wrist gave way. But the iron screamed. It bent. He roared, a sound that was not human. He threw himself backward, a final, convulsive twist. The cuff sprang open. His hand was free. He fell to the floor, clutching his wrist. It was a ruin, a bloody, mangled, broken thing. He did not care. He was free. He staggered to his feet. He looked. They had left him nothing. No rifle, no knife, no food. He smiled. A terrible, bloody smile. He did not need a rifle. He needed a fire. He stumbled out of the door. The world was white. He fell to his knees. He scooped snow with his good hand and pressed it to his broken, bleeding wrist. The cold sea red. It stopped the pain. It slowed the bleeding. He looked. Tracks. Horses. 5 of them. Heading south. Back toward the trapper's hut. Back toward civilization. Back toward Barrett's ranch. He looked at Scab. They had left him. They had not taken the horse. They had left him to die, but they had not shot him. "Scab," Eli whispered. The horse was huddled by the wall, half frozen. He raised his head. Eli crawled to his saddlebags. Still on the horse, he fumbled with his one good hand, and his broken, bloody one, his flint and steel, still there. "Good boy," Eli said. He fumbled in the bag. One thing, he had one thing, the bottle of whiskey. He had bought it from Jed. He had not drunk it. He had left it. He uncorked it with his teeth. He poured half of it onto the raw wound of his wrist. He did not scream. He did not have the strength. He just endured. He tore a strip from his shirt. He wrapped the wrist tight. He shoved the whiskey bottle into his coat. He found the axe. They had left that, too, useless. He went back into the sod house. He looked at the broken bunk. He took the axe. He began to chop. With one hand. It was slow, agonizing. He chopped the bunk into tinder. He took the dry sod from the walls. He had a plan, a terrible, simple, wartime plan. He put the tinder in the corner. He struck the flint. He made a fire. He fed it the sod. It was a slow, smoky fire. He went outside. He looked at the roof. It was dry. He climbed. His broken wrist was on fire. He did not care. He got on the roof. He cut a hole. He fed the tinder into the dry, ancient beams of the roof. He made a torch from the whiskey and a piece of shirt. He threw it. The way station, the sod house, his prison. It caught. He slid down. He went to Scab. He untied him. He could not get on. He could not pull himself up. The fire was roaring now. A column of black, oily smoke in the clean, white air. "Come on," he hissed at himself. He grabbed the saddle horn. He put his foot in the stirrup. He tried to pull. The pain from his wrist made him black out for a second. He fell. He tried again. He used his good hand. He hauled himself, scrambling, his broken ribs screaming, his head spinning. He fell into the saddle. He almost fell off the other side. "Now," he whispered. He kicked the horse. "Go, go!" He rode, not following the tracks, but cutting across them, taking the high ground, a gray, bloody, half-broken ghost on a half-starved horse, following the smoke, his own smoke, and the trail of the men who had taken his life. He found them on the 4th day. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had survived on hate, whiskey, and raw, bloody-minded grit. It was a ranch, not a cabin, a fortress, a huge 2-story lodge made of pine, with a dozen outbuildings, stables, a bunkhouse, a blacksmith shop. It was nestled in a low, wide valley, a scar of civilization on the land, Barrett's ranch. He watched from the ridge, the same way they had watched him. He watched for a full day. He learned. He saw her. They brought her out, just once, for air. She was not tied. She was flanked by Cobb and Milt. Her face was bruised. The place on her cheek where Cobb had hit her was a deep, ugly purple, but her back was straight. She looked at the mountains, at the snow. She looked, Eli thought, toward him. He saw the routine. Barrett, in his fine coat, rode out every morning. Milt and Cobb were her guards. There were a dozen other men, ranch hands, but they kept their distance. The stable, that was the key. Barrett loved his horses. He had a dozen of them. Fine, beautiful animals. The stables were new. They were filled with hay, dry, Sweet. Winter hay. Eli waited for the dark. He waited for the new moon. He slid down from the ridge. He was a shadow. He had no weapons. Just the axe, tied to his saddle, and the whiskey bottle, now almost empty, and his flint and steel. He left Scab a mile out. He crawled. He was back in Virginia. He was back at Cold Harbor. He was a ghost, moving through the dark. He reached the stables. He heard the horses stamping in the night. He heard a man, in the bunkhouse, playing a sad, tinny song on a harmonica. He went to the side. He found the hay store. It was beautiful. A mountain of dry, perfect tinder. He used his good hand. He pulled the cork on the whiskey. He soaked a rag he had torn from his leg. He jammed it deep into the hay. He struck his flint, once, twice. The spark caught. He did not wait to see it burn. He ran, not away, but toward the lodge. It took 5 minutes. A shout. Fire! Then another. The stables. God Almighty. The stables. The world exploded. Men poured from the bunkhouse, yelling, half-dressed. The harmonica song stopped. Mid-note, the fire was magnificent. The dry hay, the dry pine. It went up like a bomb. A huge, roaring column of orange and red flame shot into the black sky. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Chaos. Eli moved into the chaos. He was just another shadow, running. He went to the lodge. The door was open. Men were running out. He went in. The house was... It was not a cabin. It was a palace. Rugs, fine chairs, a fireplace you could stand in. He saw her. She was at the top of the stairs. Milt, the pig-eyed man, was pulling her, trying to drag her out, to safety. The fire! He was screaming. We gotta go! No! Anne was fighting him. Eli took the stairs, 3 at a time. He was a demon, covered in blood and soot, his hand a mangled black claw, his eyes burning with a light brighter than the fire outside. Milt saw him. His eyes went wide. He did not have time to be afraid. He let go of Anne. He reached for his pistol. You're dead, Milt stammered. Eli did not speak. He hit Milt with his one good hand. A closed-fist punch, fueled by 4 days of rage and starvation. It caught Milt in the throat. The man gagged, his eyes rolling. Eli hit him again, and again he beat him. A brutal, primal sound, until Milt fell, boneless, to the floor. He turned. Anne was staring at him. She was looking at his face, his hand, his eyes. Eli, she breathed. He did not speak. He scooped her up. He threw her over his shoulder. She was light, so light. He ran, out the door, into the yard. The world was fire. The stables were a roaring inferno. The fire had leaped, catching the roof of the bunkhouse. Men were running, throwing buckets of water, trying to save the horses. No one saw them, no one. He ran, past the shouting men, past the screaming horses, into the darkness. He did not stop until he was a mile away, until the roaring of the fire was a dull sound behind them. He collapsed, falling to his knees in the snow, and tumbling with him. He was burned. His arms, his coat. Embers from the fire had caught him. His coat was singed. His arms, where he had beaten the flames out, were red. He held her. He pulled her close, his good arm and his broken one wrapping around her. Eli, she was crying, her hands on his face. Your hand, your arms, you're burned. He looked at her. He looked at the fire. A huge, beautiful, orange glow on the horizon. The ranch was burning. He pulled her close. Told you I'd burn for you, he whispered. He collapsed, pulling her down with him. They lay in the snow. They were cold. They were starving. They were broken. And they were smiling. They were free. The fire was not the end. It was the beginning. They walked out of the high snows as the world was turning green. They were 2 ghosts, barely alive, leaning on a horse that was more bone than beast. Eli's right hand was a ruin. He had set the bones himself, back in the way station, his face a mask of gray, cold sweat. The bottle of whiskey empty. He had used his own axe handle as a splint. The flesh, where the iron cuff had torn it, was a raw, red map of his rage. His arms, seared by the flames of the stable fire, were wrapped in rags. He was, for the first time in his life, useless. And she, the woman he had pulled from the snow, she was the one who led them. She had the rifle. She had the axe. She had the will. She had become the provider. She hunted. She skinned the few rabbits she found with his knife, her hands clumsy but determined. She led the horse. She tended his wounds, cleaning them with snowmelt and her own fierce, quiet anger. They did not talk about where they were going. They just went north, away from Wyoming, north, away to a place where the map was blank. Months passed. The green of spring turned into the deep, hot green of summer. They crossed into Montana territory, a vast, empty land of sky and mountains. And one day, they found it. It was a valley. A small, green cup held in the palm of raw, gray mountains. A river, clear and fast, cut through it. It was untouched. There was no smoke, no cabins, no sign of men. Eli, weak and thin, his arm in a sling, slid from Scab's back. He looked at the valley. He looked at the woman beside him. "Here," he said. His voice was a dry rasp. "This is the place." They built. It was not the home he had promised to build with his bare hands. He had only one good hand, his right hand. When he finally unwrapped it, was a stiff, scarred, ugly claw. The fingers would not bend, the wrist would not turn. It was a testament, a constant, aching reminder of what he had paid for their freedom. So she became his other hand. He showed her how to fell the trees. He would make the notch with his good hand, slow and awkward. She would take the axe and finish the cut, her swings clumsy at first, then stronger, her body learning the rhythm. They raised the walls, log by log, together. It was a small, ugly cabin. The logs notched poorly, the mud chinking thick and uneven. It was not a home. It was a fortress. It was theirs. The river gave them fish. The valley gave them game. Clara learned to shoot. Eli sat on the porch, his useless hand in his lap. He set the rifle on her knees. It was heavy. She trembled. The last time she had seen a gun used, a man had been beaten. "It is a tool," Eli said, his voice quiet. "He was a different man. The war was gone from his eyes. He was just a man. It is not him, Clara. It is not Milt. It is not Cobb. It is just wood and steel. You tell it what to do." He taught her how to breathe, how to squeeze, how to wait. The first time she hit the pine cone he had set on a log, the sound of the shot echoed, loud and sharp, up the valley. She did not flinch. She reloaded. She began to hunt. She would leave at dawn, the rifle in her hands, and come back with rabbits, with grouse. He would stay, tending the small garden they had hacked from the earth. He would mend. He would cook. He was the one who kept the home. She was the one who kept them safe. And slowly, settlers came. They were not settlers. Really, they were just other shadows, like them, who had found the edges of the map. A trapper named Gideon, with a quiet, worn-out wife and 3 wild, barefoot children. An old prospector who had given up on gold and just wanted peace. They kept their distance. The valley was wide, but they saw. They saw the woman who hunted like a man, her dark hair braided down her back, a rifle on her shoulder. They saw the scarred man who worked the garden with one hand, his right arm burned from wrist to elbow, his other hand a twisted claw. The whispers began, carried from homestead to homestead. A runaway woman, a soldier who had, perhaps, run from more than just the war. They were outcasts, damaged goods. But the trapper's wife, Sadie, came one day. She came with a gift of smoked beaver tail. She was wary. She saw Clara mending a shirt. "My children," Sadie said, her voice rough from disuse. "They are wild. They cannot read their names." Clara looked at the woman. She saw a different kind of trap. "I can teach them." And so, twice a week. The Gideon children would walk the 3 miles to their cabin. Clara would sit with them on the porch. She taught them their letters. She taught them how to read from the one, battered book Eli owned. She gave them words, and in doing so, she rebuilt her own world. One day, in the late summer, a man rode into the valley. He was not a trapper. He was not a soldier. He wore a clean, black coat. He was a circuit judge, a man named Hemphill. He had come to Gideon's. He had heard the whispers. He rode to their cabin. Eli met him on the porch. Clara stood in the doorway, her hands hidden in her apron. The rifle was just inside, by the door. The judge looked at Eli. He looked at his face, at the long, white scar on his neck. "Thorne," the judge said, his voice sharp. "Eli Thorne, Ohio, 61st Infantry." Eli did not move. He did not speak. He just waited. I was a clerk," the judge said, his voice softening. "In the adjutant's office. I remember the name. I remember the report. You were listed. You were listed as dead. Cold Harbor, 1864. Eli nodded. "The report was wrong." "I see." The judge looked from Eli's scarred, ruined hand to the woman in the doorway. He was a man who understood the world. He understood why dead men stayed dead. He understood why people ran. "Son," the judge said, his voice kind, "a name can be a heavy thing to carry, especially a dead man's name." He cleared his throat. I am an officer of the court. For a fee, say $20, I can file papers. I can make you Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones. I can make you whoever you want to be. I can give you a new start. You and the missus." He was offering an escape, a way to bury Eli Thorne for good, a way to bury Clara, the runaway. Eli looked at the judge. He looked at the valley. He looked at the cabin he had built with his one good hand. He looked at the woman in the doorway, the woman who had saved his life, the woman who was his life. He reached back, his good hand finding hers. He pulled her forward, to stand beside him. "We have nothing to hide anymore," Eli said. "My name is Eli Thorne. This is my wife, Clara." The judge looked at them. He saw the scarred man. He saw the runaway woman. And for the first time, he saw them whole. He nodded, a slow, respectful motion. "Mr. Thorne, ma'am." He tipped his hat. I will be on my way." They watched him ride out of the valley. Clara, as she was now, as she had chosen to be, did not let go of his hand. The summer faded. The leaves of the aspen in the valley turned a bright, burning yellow. The nights grew cold. They chopped wood, a mountain of it, stacking it against the cabin wall. Clara was different. She was slower. She was quiet, in a new way, a thoughtful way. She had stopped hunting. She had stopped going to the Gideons. She sat by the fire, her hands in her lap. "Clara?" Eli asked one night. He knelt in front of her, his bad hand, the claw. He rested on his knee, his good hand. He touched her face. "What is it?" She looked at him, and her eyes were full of a fear he had not seen in months, not since the way station. I am afraid," she whispered. "Of what? Not the judge. No." She took his good hand. She took his ruined hand. She put them both on her belly. "Eli," she whispered, her voice breaking. I am with child." He stilled. He felt it, the swell, the life, his child. He did not smile. He saw her face. He saw her terror. He is still out there," she whispered. "Mr. Barrett, he is not a man who forgives. He is not a man who forgets. What if he finds us? What if he comes for the baby?" She was not afraid for herself. She was afraid for the life inside her. Eli looked at her. He looked at her, his wife, his Clara. He looked at the new life, the one thing in the world they had made that was not born of fear or fire. He leaned forward. He rested his forehead against hers. "Then they'd have to kill me first," he said. "It was not a promise. It was not a boast. It was a fact. It was the only truth in the world. The final scene came, as it always does in the high country, without warning. It was autumn. One day, it was winter. The next, a sudden frost hit. A wind, sharp and cold, came down from the mountains. It had the smell of ice. They were outside, gathering the last of the wood. When the wind hit, Clara stopped. She dropped the wood she was carrying. She wrapped her arms around her belly. She shivered. "It's cold," she said. Her voice was small. It was the voice of the woman he had found in the snow. It was the voice of the woman in the cave. It was the voice of the old fear, the old trauma, the memory of the ice. Eli stopped. He looked at her. He saw her, not as the hunter, not as the teacher, but as his wife, afraid of the dark. He walked to her. He did not say, "We have a fire." He did not say, "We are safe." He took off his heavy canvas coat, the one he had worn for 10 years, the one that had been his only home. It smelled of pine smoke and coffee, and him. He laid it over her shoulders, draping it around her, around the child. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, the first few, hard flakes of snow beginning to fall, melting on her face. "Then I'll burn for you again," he said, his voice a low, rough vow. His good hand and his ruined, scarred hand came up to cup her face. "And again, until there's nothing left of me but you." He held her. She leaned into him, her face buried in his chest. He held her as the snow began to fall in earnest. A white, silent curtain, trying to bury the world, but they were not in the world. They were home. They stood, holding each other, as the snow fell, and behind them, in the small, ugly cabin they had built together, the fire in the hearth crackled, warm and bright and safe, defying the cold outside. Thank you for listening to our story. We appreciate you spending your time with us. We'd love to know where you are listening from, so please feel free to leave a comment and let us know. If you enjoyed this, we hope you'll subscribe to From Wild West so you do not miss what comes next. And please, share your thoughts in English. We love hearing from you.